Story recapped here. Today, I'm going to explain a fantasy, thriller, mystery film called Let Me In. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. In 1983 at Los Alamos, New Mexico, police cars escort an ambulance to a memorial hospital with sirens blaring. They're carrying an unidentified 50-year-old man with acid burns on his face. The attendants place him on a respirator since the acid's toxic fumes seared his lungs and compromised his breathing. A detective then approaches him at the hospital. Since the man cannot speak, he hands him a pen and a notepad to write his answers. The detective then asks him to identify himself, wondering if the old man is a satanic cult member. He receives no response. A nurse directs the detective to the front desk to take a call from the lobby receptionist, who informs him that the man's daughter has inquired about her father. The man's respirator starts beeping and the nurse returns to the man's room. A loud scream reverberates through the hospital when the nurse witnesses the man jump from the 10th floor window to his death. The detective immediately rushes to the room to see what is going on. He looks through the window and sees the man's body. Feeling hopeless, the detective heads back to grab his notepad and sees a note written that says, "I'm sorry, Abby." 2 weeks earlier, 12-year-old Owen is sitting alone while singing to himself in their apartment's snow-covered courtyard until his mother called him for dinner. He then puts his hands inside his pockets, gets tons of candy wrappers, and throws them, burying them into the snow. While having dinner with his mother, the phone suddenly rings. It turns out Owen's parents are going through a divorce, so he frequently entertains himself by playing alone in his room. Owen points a knife in front of the mirror while wearing a mask as if he's threatening someone. He then grabs his telescope to peek through their neighbors, and then suddenly, he notices a girl his age and her father moving into the apartment next door. She's not wearing any shoes, which is unusual. The following day at school, a bully named Kenny throws a snowball at Owen while they're having a ceremony inside the classroom. Owen simply wipes it off while Kenny gives him a stern look. Meanwhile, during a swimming class, Kenny keeps on tripping Owen and his other classmates as well. He naughtily unties a swimsuit of his classmates, causing their teacher to punish him. Kenny seems upset and sees Owen smirking at him. Owen immediately rushes into his locker, but Kenny and his friends interrupt him, teasing him that he's a little girl. As Owen tries to escape, the bully puts him down on the floor, punching and kicking him, and even gives Owen a wedgie, causing him to urinate on himself. Owen doesn't fight back out of fear, and the bullies leave him miserable on the floor. On his way home, he stops by a convenience store to grab some of his favorite now and later candies. While paying for his sweets, he notices a Swiss knife at the counter, wondering if he would buy it as well. That evening, he notices that the new girl, Abby, is watching him as he rehearses knife attacks on a tree in the courtyard. She's not friendly and tells him right away that they're not going to be friends. Abby leaves while Owen is alone again, practicing his knife skills. Owen later sees Abby's father walk through the yard, carrying a duffel. Later that evening, Abby's father meticulously stalks a high school kid at a local supermarket and breaks into the kid's car. Unbeknownst to the presence of a man in his backseat, the kid casually drives his vehicle until he stops by a railroad as he waits for the train to pass by. Abby's father knocks him out as the train passes. He then drags him into the woods, ties him up by his ankles, and slices his throat open, draining his blood into a jug. When he's about to leave, Abby's father then trips in the snow and spills the blood on the ground. He immediately packs his things as the truck approaches. When Abby's father returns home, Abby seems upset. Through the walls, Owen hears the father saying that he's getting old, weak, and slow, and maybe even wanted to get caught. Abby then walks out. The following day, Owen's school announces the death of one of their students, advising everyone to keep safe. That night, Abby and Owen cross paths again in the courtyard. He notices Abby isn't wearing shoes again, and she stinks. Despite this, Owen shares his Rubik's Cube with her and demonstrates how to use it. Owen feels weird around her, so he returns home, leaving Abby alone with the Rubik's Cube. As her stomach growls, she drops the cube and leaves. Later that night, Abby hides, sitting in the shadows beneath a bridge. A young man hears Abby's pleading on his way to get his motorcycle parked under the bridge. Abby pretends to be sick and asks a passing man to assist her. The man then picks her up and promises to take her home when suddenly she grabs him and bites his neck. The man tries to resist her attacks, but she is too strong. Once satisfied with drinking his blood, she breaks the man's neck and runs away. When Abby returns home, she tells her father what she's done, making him furious. Owen overhears their argument once again. Still, the father cleans up Abby's mess by dumping the man's body into a small lake. One night, Abby is waiting for Owen in the yard. She's friendlier this time, and she takes the time to explain how she solved the puzzle to Owen. Abby also smells better, but it's strange that when Owen asks for her birthday, the girl can't recall it. Abby doesn't celebrate her birthdays or receive gifts because she doesn't know her birthday, so Owen offers her the Rubik's Cube as a present. They seem to be closer as they smile candidly at each other. The next day, while the rest of the class blushes while watching Romeo and Juliet, Owen is pretty busy studying Morse code symbols. Kenny and his friends confront him in the restroom later and inquire about what he was working on in class. When Owen refuses to show him, Kenny hits him with a metal wire, causing a gash on his left cheek. At dinner, Owen later informs his distant and inattentive mother that he fell during recess. His mother tells him to be more careful next time. After dinner, Owen meets Abby in the yard, as is customary. Owen tells her the truth about what happened when she notices the band-aid on his cheek. She warns him that if he hits them hard enough, they will stop. Abby even promises to assist him if they continue hurting him. However, Owen tells her about the Morse code he learned so that they can communicate through walls. Abby wonders if Owen hears them, to which he responds only sometimes, prompting him to ask more questions about it. When she returns to their unit, she commands her father to move away from the wall so she and Owen can practice tapping Morse code on the wall that divides their apartments. The following day, Owen enrolls in the weightlifting program at school, hoping he can beat his bullies. Later that day, Owen sneaks through her mom's room to steal $20 while gazing at a sacred photo. He later takes Abby to an arcade. He hands her his favorite candy bars. She initially refuses but then tries one. Upon eating the candy, she heads out as she tries to vomit it. Owen follows her and Abby apologizes. Feeling bad, Owen then hugs her to comfort her. While hugging, Abby inquires if he would still like her if she weren't a girl, to which Owen responds, "I guess so," not entirely realizing what Abby means. They walk home, and while nearing the apartment, Abby holds his hand, but suddenly Owen's mother calls his name, asking him to go home. Feeling disappointed, he talks her out for a second, but she's gone when he comes back for Abby. However, they meet in the corridor, smiling at each other while saying goodnight. While preparing his duffel bag, father greets Abby as she walks in the door. Abby slowly approaches him and caresses his face. The father holds her hand and tells her not to meet Owen again as he becomes envious as Owen and Abby's friendship grows stronger. During the night, Abby's father makes another attempt to get blood for Abby. He finds another target and hides in the back seat of their car once again. However, the target's friend named Greg ruins Abby's father's plans as Greg suddenly asks for a ride. The target pulls over for gas, leaving Greg alone inside the car. When the kid reaches for his bag in the backseat, Abby's father assaults him. The struggling kid causes them to crash into a barrier and flip over, trapping father beneath the vehicle and killing Greg instantly. Abby's father knows that the police find him soon, so he pours acid on his face so he couldn't be identified. While Abby is on her bed, comforted by the fact that Owen is on the other side of the wall, she suddenly learns through a radio report that her father is in the hospital and under investigation. She goes to the hospital and heads to its front desk to ask for her father. However, the front desk officer tells her to wait as she calls for assistance. Abby refuses and heads out of the hospital. The front desk officer follows her out, but she's suddenly gone. It turns out she's climbed up the building until she reaches her father's window. The burnt-faced father welcomes her and extends his neck to her. After she drains his blood, father falls to his death, while Abby hides from the dark. The detective, taking a call from the receptionist in the lobby, hears the nurse scream and arrives in the father's room. As soon as the detective leaves the window after peeking through what happened, Abby jumps off the building, escaping the scene. Abby then returns to the apartment building a little while later and knocks on Owen's window, requesting entry. Owen is almost asleep when she enters the room. Still, he tells her to come in. Abby crawls into bed with him after removing her bloody clothes. When Owen asks if she wants to be his girlfriend, Abby responds that she's not a girl, but that doesn't seem to bother Owen, so they decide to be in a relationship. Abby returns to her unit the following day, but she leaves Owen a note saying she has to go away. One afternoon, during a school outing to a local pond for ice skating, Kenny and his friends confront Owen again, threatening to push him into an ice hole. This time, Owen stands up for himself and summons the courage to strike Kenny with a big stick in the head, causing Kenny's ear to bleed. At the same time, other students notice a body frozen in the ice. The cops arrive and take the body out of the lake. Later that night, the detective knocks on their unit at home, asking a few questions about the killing incident that happened in their neighborhood. The detective knocks on Abby's apartment, but she refuses to open it. The next day, Owen happens to see Jimmy, Kenny's older brother, tripping him about his ears. Owen is delighted to see Kenny experiencing what he had gone through. When he goes home, he tells Abby about fighting back against his bullies, doing what Abby advised her. They seem happy and satisfied. Feeling proud of him, Abby kisses his cheek. Owen then takes Abby to a secret room in the basement of the apartment building that night. When Abby asks why they're in the basement, Owen asks her to close her eyes. He then pulls out a knife and cuts his palm, offering a pact by mixing blood with her. As she watches Owen's blood drip on the floor, Abby can't stand the hunger she's feeling. She collapses to the ground and begins licking Owen's blood off of the floor. Abby finally transforms into her actual vampire figure with white cataract eyes, unappealing facial warts, and sharp teeth. Abby hisses at Owen to leave, and when he doesn't, she runs away. She climbs up a tree while overcome with bloodlust, waiting for the next victim. Meanwhile, Virginia is arguing with her boyfriend, Larry, when suddenly Abby pounces. Fortunately, Larry manages to stop Abby from killing Virginia, and he immediately rushes her to the hospital. Later that day, the detective comes to question Larry at the hospital. Unfortunately, the nurse transfuses Virginia with 6 pints of blood. While the detective talks with Larry, Virginia wakes up, gazing at her blood from the injection. When the nurse opens the curtains, Virginia is drinking her own blood from her arm and bursts into flames, burning Virginia and the nurse alive. Meanwhile, Owen seems confused and surprised by what he recently learned. He looks for someone to talk to, so Owen heads to see her mother, but it turns out she's sleeping. Meanwhile, Owen desperately calls his dad, who doesn't take him seriously after Owen asks about evils. Owen starts to cry when his dad shrugs off his ideas, wondering what he would do. His father hangs up the phone, and Owen sobs harder with the phone in his hands. Still, Owen tries to confront Abby. He knocks on her unit and asks for permission to let him in. When he asks if she is a vampire, she appears to be oblivious to the term and says she needs blood to survive. He inquires as to her actual age. She admits to being 12 again but says she's been 12 years old for a long time. He then asks about her father's whereabouts, to which she responds that he was not her biological father. Owen came across an old photograph of Abby and father when the old man was around 12 years old, while Abby appears to be the same as she is now. Owen returns home, fearful of what she might do to him. The next day, Abby knocks on the door. She asks if he could let her in, but Owen refuses. He inquires as to what would happen if he didn't let her in. She responds with nothing and enters quietly and uninvitedly. However, her skin begins to bleed almost immediately, telling him that happens when vampires are not invited. Feeling worried, Owen greets her with a hug and finally gives her permission to enter. Later on, Abby takes a shower while Owen fixes her clothes covered with blood. He dumps them into the garbage after washing off the bloodstains. Owen cheerfully dances while waiting for Abby in the shower, and he even offers his mother's old dresses for her to wear. When Owen's mother arrives unexpectedly, Abby dashes across the window from Owen's apartment to hers, even though they are 2 stories apart. The following day, Owen finds a note from Abby asking him whether he would like to hang out with her that evening. He is lying on the floor inside Abby's apartment. Meanwhile, based on Larry's description of Virginia's attacker, the detective manages to trace it to Abby, leading to her apartment. He breaks in and carefully examines the place. Owen hides immediately as the detective continues his search for Abby. Finally, the man finds her asleep in the bathtub. Because he can't see in the dark, he rips open the foil covering the windows. Immediately, Abby's skin begins to crack when exposed to the sunlight. Owen screams, giving Abby sufficient time to jump on the detective and drink his blood. As the man lies dying on the floor, he reaches out to Owen for help, but Owen closes the bathroom door and leaves the man to his fate. After feeding, Abby heads out of the bathroom and hugs Owen from behind. Abby informs him that she must go away before the rest of the police show up looking for the detective. With blood on her mouth, she kisses Owen on his lips. Feeling down, Owen leaves her unit and enters the next door. That night, Owen looks out the window to see Abby getting into a taxi to move away. The detective lies beneath the basement where Owen took Abby for a pat. Meanwhile, after Abby is gone, Owen returns to his regular boring routine of going to school and going home. One evening, he starts his swimming lessons with Mr. Zora. As he gets into his swimsuit and begins his swimming lesson, Kenny and his friends gather Owen's things and start a fire in the dumpster behind the gym, forcing Mr. Zora to leave the pool area unattended. When Mr. Zora goes to put out the fire, they lock him out of the gym and go back into the pool, where Kenny's older brother Jimmy kicks everyone out of the pool and makes Owen get back in. Jimmy asks Owen to either stay underwater for 3 minutes or have one of his eyes poked out using his knife. Then Jimmy slams Owen into the pool. A minute goes by, and the chaos begins in the gym. Owen hears his bullies screaming, then Jimmy's severed head falls into the water, following more body parts. Nearly drowned, Owen emerges from the water and crawls out. When he raises his eyes, he sees Abby's bloody feet standing in front of him. Apparently, she crashed into the pool area through a skylight window and dismembered all 4 bullies in a matter of seconds to save Owen. Upon seeing Abby, Owen smirks. They leave the bloody pool with body parts all over the gym. Later, Owen is sitting on a train bound for an unknown destination while snowing outside. In front of him is a large trunk, and Abby is tapping from the inside. Owen responds with a Morse code tap, telling her that the train started to move, and he then chews his favorite candy while humming, "Eat some now, save some for later." From the beginning, the story implies Owen's fate as he is singing the tagline of his favorite now and later candy. He's singing the lines "Eat some now, save some for later," which will later become his responsibility. To provide blood for Abby, for her to feed and save some, for him to have some supplies. The story focuses tightly on Owen and Abby. Both characters are sexually threatened or insecure in some way. Bullies refer to Owen as a girl, and they seem obsessed with seeing his genitals to confirm his sexuality. Abby, on the other hand, feels insecure because she is limited to do usual things. They immediately feel a bond with one another. However, as Owen and Abby come closer, they are both afraid of intimacy and contact due to their personal reasons, and their only sensual moments are tender hugs and kisses. Towards the ending, it's clear that Owen has taken the role of Abby's protector and handler, and the two of them are on their way to start a new life together. Abby will also look after him and save him from growing up and functioning as a normal male. She'll be in charge of everything, which will later become Owen's desire to surrender control. In the end, the price of not being a victim is to be a servant, who Abby's former lover selflessly demonstrated. In the last part of the story, Owen is still humming the tagline, "Eat some now, save some for later," while eating his favorite candy, implying the consequences of the choice he made.